"Stop the wedding! Your Grace is about to marry the woman who ordered your heirs murdered." The accusation came from the back of the cathedral, where the Duke's supposedly dead wife stood with 5 boys who appeared to share his face. For 6 years, Nathaniel Ashcombe, Duke of Blackridge, had believed Eleanor perished when her carriage plunged into the River Wye. No body had ever been recovered, but the wrecked carriage door had carried her blood, and his cousin had sworn that he had watched the current take her. Now Eleanor stood beneath the open cathedral doors, pale but unmistakably alive. The 5 boys beside her wore plain dark coats. They differed slightly in height, but each possessed the same black hair, sharply carved cheekbones, and grey eyes seen in every male portrait at Blackridge Hall. Nathaniel's hand went slack. The wedding ring fell from his fingers and struck the marble floor. Lady Arabella, his bride, stared at Eleanor as though a corpse had walked out of its grave. "This is an outrage," she whispered. Eleanor stepped into the aisle. She wore no jewels and carried no weapon. A faded scar crossed her right temple, disappearing beneath her brown hair. In one hand, she held a scorched leather case. In the other was the hand of the smallest boy. The congregation turned as the 6 of them advanced. One of the boys clutched a burned fragment of Nathaniel's marriage settlement. Another carried a silver rattle engraved with the Blackridge crest. Nathaniel recognized it instantly. He had given that rattle to Eleanor shortly before her confinement. He had found the nursery empty 3 days later, after a physician informed him that the child had been born dead. His gaze moved from one boy to the next. The eldest could not have been more than 9. The youngest appeared 6, the exact age his son would have been. "Which one is mine?" Nathaniel demanded. Eleanor stopped halfway down the aisle. "That is the question your enemy expects you to ask." A murmur passed through the noble guests. Arabella seized Nathaniel's arm. "She has brought 5 street children dressed to resemble you. This is extortion. No amount of clothing can create his eyes," the Dowager Duchess said from the front pew. Arabella's fingers tightened. Eleanor noticed it. So did Nathaniel. Yet when Eleanor opened the scorched case, he did not approach her. He remained beside the woman he had intended to marry. Inside the case lay 5 folded certificates, each bearing a different parish seal. "These boys are all descended from the Blackridge line," Eleanor said. "One is your son. The other 4 are the orphaned sons of men whose claims stand between Lord Silas and control of the northern estates." At the mention of Nathaniel's cousin, several guests glanced toward the side chapel. Lord Silas was not there. He had been standing beside the altar only minutes earlier. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "Silas arranged this wedding," Eleanor continued. "He selected the household officers who replaced mine. He found the witnesses who declared me dead. And 3 months ago he began searching parish houses for 5 boys whose names had been removed from the family register." "That is enough," Arabella cried. "She insults the man who saved his grace from scandal." Eleanor looked directly at Nathaniel. "Did Silas tell you he visited my carriage before it left Blackridge?" Nathaniel remembered the rain that night. He remembered Eleanor begging him to examine the physician's report, proving that her child had lived. He had refused. He had been furious over letters that appeared to show she had taken a lover, and Silas had urged him to send her away before the accusation reached the king. Nathaniel had chosen humiliation over investigation. He had ordered Eleanor escorted from his house before dawn. "Those letters carried your handwriting," he said, although the certainty had vanished from his voice. "They carried an imitation of it. You expect me to accept that after 6 years? I expect nothing from you anymore." The quiet answer struck harder than an accusation. Eleanor placed the leather case on the marble floor. "I came for the boys, not for my marriage. Compare the ink on those certificates with the ink used in your private register. Ask why 4 parish clerks died after refusing to surrender their records. But do it before noon." "Why noon?" Nathaniel asked. "Because after you marry Arabella, Lord Silas will gain the authority he needs to challenge every one of these claims." Arabella laughed, but the sound broke in her throat. Then the cathedral window shattered. Coloured glass exploded over the congregation. Eleanor threw herself across the smallest child as a crossbow bolt struck the altar rail where the eldest boy had been standing seconds earlier. People screamed and rushed toward the doors. "Close the cathedral!" Nathaniel roared. His guards obeyed. Eleanor rose, blood running from a cut along her palm. 4 boys gathered around her while the eldest stared at the bolt buried in the wood. A strip of blue silk had been tied beneath its iron head, the same shade of blue as Arabella's wedding gown. Arabella recoiled. She brought it herself. She planned this spectacle. Nathaniel descended from the altar and pulled a pistol from beneath his ceremonial coat. For one terrible moment, Eleanor believed he had finally understood. Then he aimed the weapon at her. The 5 boys moved in front of her without being told. The sight silenced the cathedral. "Step away from them," Nathaniel ordered. Eleanor's face changed not with fear, but with the recognition of an old wound opening exactly where it had before. "You still believe the first person who gives you someone to blame. I will not gamble 5 children's lives on your word. But you will gamble them on hers?" Nathaniel looked at Arabella. She was trembling beside the altar, one gloved hand pressed against her waist. Near her slipper lay the wedding ring he had dropped. He noticed a smear of blue sealing wax on her glove. The certificates inside Eleanor's case had been sealed in red. He had seen blue wax somewhere that morning, though he could not remember where. It should have stopped him. It did not. "Remove the boys from her custody," he commanded. "Place them in the east nursery under guard." Eleanor stepped back. "No, and take the Duchess to the lower tower." The title escaped him instinctively. Arabella's face hardened. One guard hesitated. "Your Grace, on what charge?" Nathaniel looked at the broken window, the crossbow bolt, and the 5 terrified faces that resembled his own. "Treason," he said. The entire congregation fell silent. As the guards approached, Eleanor did not resist. She bent and whispered something to the smallest boy, then slipped the silver rattle into his hand. The child closed his fingers around it. A moment later, he shook it once. No sound came from inside. Eleanor's eyes widened. Someone had opened the rattle and removed the object she had hidden there. Only 3 people knew what it contained. One was Eleanor, one was the boy, and the third was already inside the cathedral. The third person who knew what the silver rattle contained was the old family chaplain. Eleanor raised her eyes toward the choir stalls. Reverend Matthew Hale had been seated there when she entered the cathedral. His place was empty now. "Wait," she said. The guards continued pulling her toward the side passage. "The man who performed our wedding has disappeared." Nathaniel turned toward the vacant chair. Before he could respond, Arabella descended from the altar. "Reverend Hale is an old man." The crossbow frightened him, as it frightened everyone. "He would never abandon 5 children in danger," Eleanor said. "You have not seen him in 6 years. I saw him 3 nights ago." That stopped Nathaniel. Eleanor had not intended to reveal the meeting so soon, but the silent rattle changed everything. Hale had hidden a narrow brass key inside it, a key to the locked family register beneath Blackridge Chapel. If someone possessed it now, every original record protecting the boys could be destroyed before noon. Nathaniel approached her. "Where did you meet him?" "At St. Jude's parish house." "Why?" "Because he helped me prove that my child was born alive." Nathaniel's face tightened. He had once loved the gentleness in Eleanor's voice. Now he searched it for deception, as though 6 years had taught him nothing. Arabella stepped between them. "Your Grace, the congregation has witnessed an attack. This woman must be questioned somewhere, secure." Two, and the boys must remain together," Eleanor said. "No servant chosen by Lord Silas is to approach them." "You do not command this household," Arabella replied. Eleanor met her gaze. "Neither do you. The wedding was never completed." A ripple of whispers moved through the cathedral. Arabella's cheeks lost their colour. Nathaniel looked toward the bishop, who stood beside the altar, brushing glass from his robes. "Is she correct?" "No vows were completed, and no register was signed," the bishop answered. "Whatever else is true, Lady Arabella is not yet your wife." The words gave Eleanor her first, small victory. Arabella could not legally assume authority over the boys, not yet. Nathaniel lowered his pistol. "Take Eleanor to the lower tower. No one speaks to her without my permission. Put my own guards outside the nursery." Eleanor studied the captain receiving the order. A strip of blue thread clung to the buckle of his sword belt. It might have come from the shattered wedding decorations. It might also have come from the silk tied around the bolt. She forced herself not to stare. "And Reverend Hale?" she asked. "I will find him. You had 6 years to find the truth." Pain flickered across Nathaniel's face. Then it disappeared. "Take her." The lower tower had once been used to store estate records. Eleanor knew every step in its winding stairway because she had spent the first 4 years of her marriage carrying household ledgers between the archive room and Nathaniel's study. He had never asked how his debts disappeared. He had never known she negotiated extensions with creditors, corrected rent errors, or discovered that 3 farms listed as unprofitable were actually being charged twice for the same repairs. Eleanor had learned such work from her father, a church registrar who believed records protected the powerless only when honest people understood them. As a girl, she had copied baptismal entries, compared signatures, and memorized the small variations used by neighboring parishes. That knowledge had saved the 5 boys. After surviving the carriage attack, Eleanor had awakened in a riverside cottage with a fractured shoulder and no memory of how she arrived there. She was still weak from childbirth, yet the physician travelling with her had vanished. Only the infant hidden beneath the overturned carriage seat remained. Her son had been alive. She had named him Samuel. Within a month, someone tried to burn the cottage. Eleanor fled with the baby and began following the altered parish records. One erased name led to another until she found 4 other boys belonging to the Blackridge bloodline. Their fathers had died in accidents within 18 months of one another. Eleanor could have crossed the sea and saved only herself and Samuel. She stayed because each boy she found made the pattern clearer. Someone was removing every male descendant who could challenge Silas's control of the northern lands. The tower door opened. The same captain pushed her inside while another guard fastened an iron bar across the outer door. "You should have let the bolt finish its work," the captain muttered. Eleanor turned sharply. "What did you say?" He had already closed the door. She crossed the small chamber and pressed her ear to the wood. Footsteps descended the staircase. Then another, softer sound came from behind the shelves. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 more. It was the signal Reverend Hale had taught the boys. Eleanor pulled aside a stack of rotting account books. A narrow panel opened, and a young cathedral clerk crawled through the gap. His sleeve was torn, and blood marked his collar. "Reverend Hale sent me," he whispered. "Where is he?" "Lord Silas's men took him through the crypt." Eleanor gripped the shelf to steady herself. The key was removed from the rattle. "I know. Reverend Hale removed it himself." "Why?" "Because someone searched the parish house last night. He feared the rattle had been discovered." The clerk reached into his coat and gave her a folded paper. It was a copy of the cathedral's temporary guard list. 5 names had been added that morning in a different hand. Each man was now stationed near the east nursery. Eleanor scanned the alterations. The false names were written in brown ink, but the captain's signature beneath them was genuine. "Can you reach the Duke?" she asked. "I tried. Lady Arabella's servants blocked every passage." "Then take the old archive tunnel to the nursery. Tell the boys to use the lesson I taught them at Briar House." "What lesson?" "They will understand when you say, 'The book has lost its spine.'" The clerk nodded and moved toward the hidden panel. "Wait." Eleanor caught his arm. "Who fired the crossbow?" "No one outside the cathedral could have done it." "How do you know?" "The bolt entered through the window." "I saw that." "No, Your Grace. It broke the glass from inside." Eleanor stared at him. The accusation against her depended upon the claim that an assassin had fired through the window after arriving with her. But the marks on the glass proved the weapon had been discharged from the gallery above the congregation. The shooter had been locked inside the cathedral before Eleanor ever opened its doors. And Nathaniel's order had just placed all 5 boys under the authority of the captain who had admitted those men. The 5 false guards reached the east nursery less than 2 minutes after Eleanor sent the clerk through the archive tunnel. Inside, the boys stood in a straight line beside the cold fireplace. The eldest watched the captain unlock the door. "Her Grace has been moved," the captain announced. "The Duke has ordered us to take you somewhere safer." The youngest boy gripped the silent silver rattle. None of them moved. Then the clerk's voice whispered through a gap behind the bookcase. "The book has lost its spine." The eldest boy immediately knocked over a chair. The others scattered. One crawled beneath the bed. 2 disappeared behind the curtains. The smallest threw the silver rattle through the open nursery door and shouted, "Samuel, run!" Every false guard chased the child nearest the door. It was exactly what Eleanor had trained them to expect. If an enemy ever learned that the Duke's son was named Samuel, the boys were to answer to that name in turn. forcing the attacker to reveal whether he wanted one child or all five. The captain seized the second youngest boy. "Got you, Samuel." The eldest slipped behind him and pulled the nursery bell cord 3 times the signal for fire. Servants rushed into the passage. The false guards released the child, but they had already exposed themselves. Nathaniel's real household men arrived from the opposite stairway and found strangers inside a locked nursery wearing borrowed Blackridge uniforms. The captain reached for his sword. The Dowager Duchess struck his wrist with her walking stick. "You will draw no blade near my grandsons." The word escaped before anyone knew which boy truly belonged to her. All 5 children looked at her. Her expression trembled, but she lifted her chin. "Until the truth is established, you will address them all with the respect owed to this family." Nathaniel arrived moments later. He stared at the false guards, then at the altered list discovered in the captain's coat. Who admitted these men? No one answered. The captain had vanished from his post outside Eleanor's tower. Nathaniel descended the tower stairs himself. 2 guards followed him, along with Lord Silas, who had reappeared claiming he had been searching the cathedral grounds for the crossbowmen. Silas was Nathaniel's closest living male relative, a handsome man with carefully trimmed dark hair and an easy voice that had calmed the Duke through years of scandal. He was also Arabella's maternal cousin. "You cannot question Eleanor alone," Silas warned. "She has deceived you before." Nathaniel stopped outside the iron-bound door. "The men assigned to the nursery carried orders bearing my captain's signature. Then your captain has betrayed you. He recommended Arabella's household guards." "On my advice," Silas admitted, "because I believed they were loyal." Nathaniel studied him. Silas did not look away. That had always been his strength. He could offer a partial truth with the confidence of a complete one. The door opened. Eleanor stood beside the archive shelves, the folded guard list hidden inside her sleeve. The clerk had already departed through the secret panel. "Where is my captain?" Nathaniel asked. "Not here. He was seen entering this stairway." "Then perhaps you should search the passages your new household claims do not exist." Silas entered behind him. For the first time since returning to the cathedral, Eleanor's composure cracked. She remembered his gloved hand closing the door of her carriage 6 years earlier. She remembered him promising that Nathaniel would calm down before she reached the northern estate. Hours later, the wheel had broken loose on a cliff road. Silas smiled. "You appear remarkably healthy for a dead woman. You appear remarkably calm for a man whose inheritance has just acquired 5 obstacles." Nathaniel stepped between them. "The boys are safe." "For how long?" "The false guards have been arrested." "And the captain?" "We are searching for him." Eleanor's eyes moved to Silas. "He is already dead or being prepared to confess." Silas laughed softly. "You return from the grave and begin predicting deaths. I understand your method now. You create a guilty man before you create the crime." Nathaniel flinched. 6 years earlier, Eleanor had been made guilty through forged letters before her carriage was attacked. Today, she had been accused of arranging a crossbow assault before anyone examined the broken glass. The pattern was visible, but accepting it would mean admitting that every decision Nathaniel had made against Eleanor had served another man. He was not ready. "Tell me which boy is my son," he demanded. "No." Silas's smile widened. Nathaniel's voice hardened. "You enter my wedding with 5 children bearing my family's face, accuse my bride and cousin, then refuse the one answer that could prove you are not using innocent boys to reclaim your title." "My title?" Eleanor repeated. "You believe I came back for a title?" "What else?" The question silenced her. For one brief moment, grief broke through her anger. She had spent 6 years sleeping beside locked doors, moving children between parish houses, and checking every window before allowing them to eat. Nathaniel looked at her and saw ambition. Eleanor turned away so he would not see her eyes fill. "I will identify Samuel when every boy is under protection beyond your cousin's reach." Silas moved closer. "Samuel?" Eleanor looked at him. Nathaniel had used no name. Neither had she during the confrontation in the cathedral. Yet Silas had spoken it with recognition, not surprise. Nathaniel noticed. Silas recovered quickly. The false guards shouted the name in the nursery. Half the servants heard it. A reasonable explanation. Nathaniel accepted it because the alternative was unbearable. "You have until noon to give me the truth," he told Eleanor. "After that, The bishop will hear the evidence against you. No, she said. At noon, you will open the Blackridge family register before witnesses. Silas's eyes sharpened. The register was destroyed in the chapel fire. The copy was destroyed. Eleanor faced him fully. The original is beneath Blackridge Chapel, locked inside a stone chest. Reverend Hale has the only key. For the first time, Silas lost his smile. It lasted less than a second, but Eleanor saw it. So did Nathaniel. A cathedral bell began to ring. One slow stroke, then a second. A servant ran down the tower steps, breathless and pale. Your Grace, there is smoke rising from Blackridge Chapel. Eleanor looked at Silas. He no longer regarded her as a discarded wife who could be silenced with another accusation. He looked at her as the only person alive who knew exactly what he needed to destroy. Smoke rolled above the trees before Nathaniel's carriage reached Blackridge Chapel. Eleanor sat opposite him, with her wrists bound. Silas rode behind them, having insisted that Eleanor remain a prisoner, even while guiding them to the register. Arabella stayed at the cathedral with the boys, or so Nathaniel believed. As the carriage stopped, Eleanor saw a second set of wheel tracks cutting across the wet ground toward the rear gate. Arabella is already here, she said. Nathaniel looked through the window. You cannot know that. Those tracks are narrow. Her wedding carriage has narrow rear wheels. Silas opened the door, or they belong to any light carriage in the county. Eleanor jumped down without accepting his hand. Flames burned inside the chapel vestry, but the stone nave remained untouched. Servants formed a line from the well, passing buckets toward the entrance. The fire is in the wrong place, Eleanor said. Nathaniel frowned. Wrong for what? To destroy the register. The stone chest lies beneath the family crypt. Then Silas failed? Nathaniel asked quietly. Eleanor looked at him. Or the fire was never intended to destroy it. A scream came from inside the chapel. Eleanor ran toward the door. A guard caught her bound wrists. The Duke ordered, "There is someone in there." Nathaniel cut the cord with his knife. "Let her go." Silas seized his shoulder. "You are releasing a woman accused of treason into a burning building. She knows the chapel better than any of us." Eleanor entered before Nathaniel finished speaking. The smoke made her eyes burn. She dropped low and followed the sound toward the vestry. A fallen beam blocked the main passage, but Eleanor remembered a narrow servant's door hidden behind the altar curtain. She pulled the curtain aside. The young cathedral clerk lay beneath a broken shelf, one leg trapped. He had reached the chapel before them and been attacked while searching for Reverend Hale. Eleanor pushed against the shelf. It did not move. "Leave me," he coughed. "The chest. The boys need living witnesses more than dead records." She wrapped a strip of curtain around her hands and lifted again. Nathaniel appeared through the smoke. Together, they raised the shelf high enough for the clerk to crawl free. For an instant, Eleanor and Nathaniel stood on opposite sides of the weight, their faces inches apart. 6 years disappeared beneath the roar of the fire. He remembered her laughing in this chapel after their wedding, before suspicion entered their marriage. Then Silas arrived with 2 servants. "I have him," Nathaniel said. Eleanor released the shelf and turned toward the crypt stairs. The iron gate below the altar stood open. "The key," she whispered. Reverend Hale's brass key had already been used. She descended quickly. The stone chest sat in the center of the crypt with its lid raised. The Blackridge family register remained inside. Silas reached it before her. He lifted the heavy book with both hands and carried it up the stairs. "The register is safe," he shouted. The servants outside cheered. By the time Eleanor emerged, coughing and covered in soot, Silas stood beside Nathaniel holding the book as though he had personally rescued it from the flames. Arabella's carriage waited near the rear wall. She stepped from behind it, still wearing her blue wedding gown beneath a travelling cloak. "You saved the history of this family," she told Silas loudly. Eleanor placed the injured clerk against the chapel wall. "He did not save it. He collected it from an open chest." Arabella looked toward the servants. Even now, she cannot bear to see another person praised. The words worked. Several people had watched Silas emerge carrying the register. No one had seen Eleanor find the open crypt or rescue the clerk behind the smoke. Nathaniel had, yet he said nothing. Eleanor looked at him. His silence was smaller than ordering her arrest, but it carried the same wound. He allowed the lie because correcting it would force him to defend her publicly. The clerk stirred beside the wall. "She saved me," he whispered. Only the old chapel keeper heard him. The keeper knelt and gave him water, then looked at Eleanor with quiet recognition. A witness had survived. When the fire was controlled, Nathaniel placed the register on the chapel altar. Eleanor opened it carefully. The first pages contained births and marriages from the previous century. The paper darkened near the center, where 5 recent entries should have appeared. She examined the binding. 4 pages had been cut away, not torn, cut cleanly from the stitched spine. "The boy's records are gone," Nathaniel said. "The entries were here," Eleanor replied. "Look at the numbering. Off page 112 was followed by page 117. Silas leaned closer. "A damaged book proves nothing. It proves someone opened the chest before the fire and removed exactly the pages concerning the 5 surviving boys." Arabella folded her hands. "Or Eleanor removed them herself, because those entries never supported her story." Eleanor pointed to the loosened threads along the spine. "The cuts are fresh. The linen has not darkened." "You entered the chapel first," Silas said. "You had time. I was carrying an injured man out of the vestry. A clerk who serves Reverend Hale." Nathaniel looked toward the young man. The clerk had lost consciousness again. Arabella lowered her voice. "Every witness she produces belongs to her conspiracy." The chapel keeper rose slowly. "I saw Lady Arabella's maid here before the smoke began." Arabella turned. The old man removed a folded message from his pocket. "She gave this to the captain at the rear gate. He dropped it when the fire bell rang." Blue wax sealed the paper. The same blue wax Nathaniel had noticed on Arabella's glove. Nathaniel broke the seal. The message contained only one sentence. "Bring the 5 boys to the chapel before noon." It bore his signature. "I did not write this," Nathaniel said. Arabella stared at the paper with convincing horror. "Then Eleanor forged it. She was imprisoned when it arrived," the chapel keeper replied. Silence settled over the ruined chapel. For the first time, Nathaniel possessed a lie he could not easily place at Eleanor's feet. A weak voice came from the doorway. "Because she didn't it was forge it." 2 servants carried Reverend Hale inside. His face was bruised, and a blood-stained bandage circled his head, but he was conscious. He looked directly at Nathaniel. "I know who falsified your wife's letters. I know who attacked her carriage, and I know which boy is your son." Nathaniel had finally been given the chance to hear the truth he had refused 6 years earlier. Reverend Hale collapsed before he could give the name. Nathaniel caught him while Eleanor called for water. The old man's pulse fluttered weakly beneath her fingers. "Something is wrong," she said. "He was struck on the head," Silas replied. Eleanor smelled the water a servant had carried into the chapel. Bitter almonds. She knocked the cup away. It shattered across the floor. The young clerk stared at the broken pieces. "That came from Lady Arabella's carriage." Arabella turned on him. "You are lying." "No," Eleanor said. "He is frightened. There is a difference." Nathaniel ordered the carriage searched. The water flask was found beneath a seat, but Arabella's maid claimed Eleanor's clerk had placed it there during the confusion. Again, every fact arrived, with 2 explanations. Again, Nathaniel stood between the woman he had punished and the people whose influence he had never questioned. Reverend Hale opened his eyes. "Your Grace," he rasped. Nathaniel knelt beside him. "Who forged the letters?" "The captain copied your hand." "But the orders came from—" A trumpet sounded outside. 3 royal officers entered the chapel with a magistrate carrying a sealed packet. Silas lowered his head to hide his relief. The magistrate bowed to Nathaniel. "Your Grace, we receive notice that 5 children of noble blood were abducted from 4 counties and brought here under false identities. Parliament has ordered their immediate protection pending an inquiry." "Who sent the notice?" Eleanor asked. The magistrate ignored her. He handed Nathaniel the document. Arabella moved beside him as he read. The order accused Eleanor of removing the boys from lawful guardians, altering parish records, and presenting them at the Duke's wedding to force recognition of a false heir. Until the inquiry concluded, the children were to be placed under the care of the nearest adult male relative, not directly claiming paternity. "Lord Silas." Eleanor felt the trap close. "This was prepared before I entered the cathedral," she said. Nathaniel examined the date. The order had been issued 2 days earlier. Silas folded his hands behind his back. Then the crown knew of her plan before we did. No, you knew I was coming. Or the families from whom you stole the children finally found you. I did not steal them. 4 mothers reported their sons missing. Their mothers are dead. Silas's expression did not change. Eleanor understood. He had found women willing to claim the boys, women who would disappear as soon as their testimony was accepted. She turned to Nathaniel. Ask the magistrate when those complaints were filed. Nathaniel did. Within the last week, the magistrate answered. All 4? Yes. In 4 different counties? Yes. And all 4 women requested that the children be given to Lord Silas. The magistrate glanced at the order. That is the Crown's instruction. It is Silas's instruction carrying a royal seal. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Silas stepped forward. Your Grace, if you resist a parliamentary order on the word of a woman already accused of treason, the scandal will reach the king before nightfall. Your title, your estates, and the boys themselves will be placed under government control. There it was, the fear Silas had always used. Not fear of losing wealth, fear that the Blackridge name would become an object of public disgrace. Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. Tell me which boy is Samuel, and I can claim authority as his father. And what happens to the other 4? They go with Silas until the hearing. No. Then you leave me no lawful alternative. I have given you alternatives all morning. Examine the broken glass. Question the chapel keeper. Wait until Hale can finish his sentence. The order requires my signature now. It requires your obedience, because Silas arranged for it to arrive before you could think. Nathaniel's face hardened at the accusation. You believe every hesitation is cowardice. No. Only the ones that sacrifice children to protect your reputation. The words struck their mark. For 1 second, Nathaniel nearly tore the order. Then the royal officer spoke. Refusal will be recorded as defiance of Parliament. Arabella took Nathaniel's hand. If Eleanor is truthful, the inquiry will prove it. You are not condemning anyone. You are simply following the law. Eleanor watched Nathaniel's anger settle into the cold control she remembered from the night he expelled her. 6 years ago, he had told himself that sending her away was temporary. Now he told himself that surrendering the boys was only procedure. He accepted the pen. Do not do this, Eleanor said. Nathaniel signed. Silas's authority over the 5 boys became enforceable with a single stroke. Eleanor closed her eyes. Something inside her went quiet. She had returned believing that if Nathaniel saw enough contradictions, some remnant of the man she married would force him to act. Instead, he had chosen reputation over truth for the 2nd time. When she opened her eyes, she no longer looked at him as a husband who might be reclaimed. She looked at him as another danger the boys must survive. Silas took the signed order. I will escort the children to Hawthorne Lodge immediately. No, Eleanor said. The royal officers seized her arms. Nathaniel avoided her gaze. They will travel under guard. Your guards admitted 5 murderers into the nursery. I will send men I trust. You trusted Silas. That silenced him. The 5 boys were brought from the cathedral in separate carriages. Eleanor struggled against the officers as the youngest reached for her. Mama! It was the first time any of them had used the word publicly. All 5 cried it together. Nathaniel stood beneath the chapel arch, surrounded by armed men, while the children begged the woman he had imprisoned not to let them be taken. Eleanor forced her voice to remain steady. Remember the lost book. The eldest nodded through his tears. Silas placed him in the first carriage. The smallest boy still held the silver rattle. As a guard lifted him, he shook it twice, then pressed it against the carriage wall. This time, Eleanor heard something move inside. The rattle was no longer empty. Someone had returned an object to it. The carriages began rolling toward the northern road. The old chapel keeper hurried to Eleanor's side. Your Grace, he whispered, Hawthorne Lodge has been empty for 12 years. Eleanor watched Silas mount his horse. Then where is he taking them? The keeper's face turned pale. Toward Blackridge Gorge. A memory struck Eleanor. 6 years earlier, the wheel of her carriage had come loose on that same road. Now 5 boys were being taken toward the cliff where Silas had already tried to kill her once. The parliamentary order gives Lord Silas custody of the children, Eleanor said. It does not authorize my imprisonment. The royal officers exchanged uncertain looks. Nathaniel read the document again. She was correct. There was no warrant for her arrest, no charge signed by a magistrate, and no order permitting anyone to restrain her. Nathaniel had called her a traitor in the cathedral, but his accusation carried no legal force by itself. "Release her," he said. Silas's carriages had already vanished beyond the trees. The officers removed Eleanor's restraints. She did not thank Nathaniel. She ran to the nearest horse, pulled herself into the saddle, and turned toward the narrow shepherd's path beside the chapel. "The northern road is that way," Nathaniel called. "The road reaches the gorge in 40 minutes. This path reaches it in 20. You cannot ride there alone. I have been alone for 6 years." Eleanor struck the horse forward. Nathaniel mounted and followed with 4 guards. Reverend Hale was left under the chapel keeper's protection, while Arabella remained behind, claiming the smoke had made her ill. As Eleanor entered the forest, she looked back once. Arabella was no longer leaning weakly against her carriage. She was speaking urgently to the royal magistrate. Inside the first carriage, the eldest boy listened to the wheels. The rhythm changed as they left the smooth northern road and turned onto the stony route toward Blackridge Gorge. "This is not the way to Hawthorne Lodge," he said. The guard opposite him drew the curtain. "You will remain quiet." The boy shook the silver rattle. A faint scrape came from inside. During the confusion at the chapel, Reverend Hale had returned the brass key and added something else, a narrow iron hook, small enough to fit through the rattle's handle. The boy twisted the engraved end until it opened. He removed the hook and pushed it into the latch beside the carriage floor. Eleanor had shown all 5 children how old mail coaches were built. Beneath the rear seat was a narrow emergency panel once used to reach broken axles. The eldest lifted the panel. Road dust rushed into the carriage. He waited until the vehicle slowed on the steep hill, then dropped his coat through the opening. It landed in the road like a dark marker. In the carriage behind him, another boy saw it. He understood. One by one, they left pieces of clothing along the route, 1 glove, 1 scarf, 1 shoe. A trail for Eleanor. She found the first coat beside the 3rd milestone. "They know where they are going," she said. Nathaniel picked it up. The sleeve had been torn deliberately. "You taught them this?" "I taught them not to wait helplessly for an adult who might never arrive." The rebuke needed no explanation. Nathaniel tied the coat behind his saddle and rode faster. At the next bend, they found an overturned escort wagon. 2 of Nathaniel's trusted guards lay bound in the ditch. Silas had replaced them after leaving the chapel. One man struggled upright. "Lord Silas showed us your signed order," he told Nathaniel. "He said you had transferred full command to him." Nathaniel's face drained. The document had done more than remove the boys from Eleanor. His signature had instructed every Blackridge servant to obey Silas in matters concerning the children. Silas had not needed to defeat Nathaniel's guards. Nathaniel had ordered them to surrender. "What is ahead?" Eleanor asked. "The old toll bridge." Eleanor's horse reared as a distant explosion shook the trees. Black smoke rose above the gorge. Silas stood beside the bridge, while the 5 carriages were arranged in a line across its weakened centre. Barrels of lamp oil had been fixed beneath the wooden supports. The captain from the cathedral waited near the fuse. He had never disappeared. He had simply changed coats. "The Duke will reach the hill soon," the captain said. "Then he will watch his heirs die, because he signed them into my custody," Silas replied. "And the children's bodies? The river will carry them beyond the county. What about the Duchess?" Silas looked toward the forest. "She survived this gorge once. She will not do so again." He lit a slow-burning cord. The captain stared at the carriages. "You said the boys would be sent abroad." Silas drew a pistol and shot him. The sound echoed through the gorge. Inside the carriages, the boys dropped to the floor. The eldest forced open the emergency panel and crawled beneath his vehicle. He reached the next carriage, released its latch, and pulled the second boy out. They moved from one vehicle to another, while the guards watched the approaching road. By the time Silas ordered the drivers to abandon the bridge, 4 boys had reached the stone support at the eastern side. The smallest remained trapped in the final carriage. Its floor panel had been nailed shut. "Go!" he shouted to the others. The eldest refused. He ran back. Eleanor reached the ridge as the fuse burned toward the barrels. She saw 4 small figures beneath the bridge. Then she saw the last carriage. "Samuel!" she screamed. Every boy looked up. Nathaniel turned toward her. She had revealed nothing. The name was their danger signal, not an identification. The carriage door burst open. The smallest boy appeared, but Silas caught him by the collar and dragged him toward the edge. "Come closer," Silas called, pressing his pistol against the child's head, and the Duke loses his son. Nathaniel dismounted. "You cannot know which one he is." Silas smiled. "I do not need to." He pushed the boy toward the gorge and ran for the trees. Eleanor rode directly onto the bridge. "Nathaniel, the fuse!" Nathaniel had to choose between pursuing Silas and stopping the explosion. This time, he chose the children. He leaped from his horse and pulled the burning cord away from the first barrel. Eleanor reached the smallest boy, caught his arm, and dragged him onto her saddle. The eldest climbed from beneath the bridge with the others. For one breath, all 5 were alive. Then a second fuse ignited beneath the far support. The first had been a distraction. The explosion split the bridge. Eleanor threw the smallest boy towards solid ground as the center span collapsed beneath her horse. Nathaniel caught the child. Eleanor disappeared with the broken timber into the gorge. Eleanor. Nathaniel dropped to his knees at the edge. Far below, the river crashed against black rock. One of the boys pointed downstream. There. Eleanor clung to a hanging rope beneath the shattered bridge. Blood ran down one side of her face, but she was alive. The old rope began to tear. Nathaniel reached for her. She was too far below. The 4 remaining boys formed a line, gripping one another's waists as the eldest lowered himself toward her hand. Together, the 5 children Eleanor had protected became the only chain strong enough to pull her from the gorge. When she reached solid ground, Nathaniel tried to touch her shoulder. She moved away. "Count the boys," she gasped. He did. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted again. Only 4 boys stood beside the broken bridge. In the confusion, Silas had taken one. A rider appeared on the opposite ridge, holding the missing child in front of him. Silas raised the Duke's signed custody order. "Bring me the original Blackridge register before midnight," he shouted, "or one heir will not live to see morning." Then he disappeared into the forest with the boy. Eleanor refused to take the 4 boys back to Blackridge Hall. Nathaniel did not argue. By sunset, she had established them at Briar House, a small school maintained by 3 parish widows beyond the Duke's authority. Eleanor had purchased the property years earlier through a trust created with her mother's inheritance. Nathaniel had never known it existed. He stood in the schoolroom doorway, while the boys ate warm bread at a long wooden table. "You built this place while you were in hiding?" he asked. "I built 6 places like it. For the boys? For any child whose name could be erased by a powerful man." The answer cut deeper than anger. Nathaniel had spent 6 years believing Eleanor dead while she created a network of safe houses, recruited parish clerks, and protected 4 branches of his family he did not know were in danger. "What are their names?" he asked. "You will learn them when they choose to tell you. They are my family. They were your family this morning when you signed them over to Silas." Nathaniel lowered his gaze. The eldest boy stopped eating and watched them. Eleanor softened her voice, but not her terms. "You may remain if you surrender your weapons, dismiss your guards beyond the gate, and obey me when the children's safety is involved. I am the Duke of Blackridge. Outside this house." Nathaniel removed his pistol and placed it on the table. Then he sent his guards away. It was the first order he had given that day which did not increase the boy's danger. Reverend Hale arrived after nightfall. The old chapel keeper accompanied him and carried the original Blackridge register wrapped in oilcloth. The young clerk brought the blue wax message and recorded the time of its arrival before 2 witnesses. Eleanor would not allow Nathaniel to handle either item. "Everything must have a clear chain of custody," she explained. "Silas will claim we altered whatever we produce. You speak as though you have prepared for a public trial. I have prepared for the day no one could dismiss me as a bitter wife." Reverend Hale sat near the fire. His voice remained weak, but his memory was clear. 6 years earlier, the Blackridge captain had confessed that Silas paid him to imitate Nathaniel's handwriting. He had copied private letters from estate instructions Nathaniel signed without reading, then used the same shapes to create supposed love letters between Eleanor and a non-existent officer. "Why did you not tell me?" Nathaniel asked. "I tried," Hale replied. Your household returned every message I sent. Nathaniel looked toward Eleanor. She did not rescue him from the shame. Hale continued. The captain later came to me because Silas ordered Eleanor's carriage wheel cut. He believed the plan was only to frighten her into leaving England. When he learned she was with child, he tried to withdraw. Yet he served Silas again today, Eleanor said. Fear makes weak men useful more than once. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Eleanor had begged him to examine the physician's report before her departure. He had thrown it into the fire. That had been the moment, not the forged letters, not Silas's manipulation, his own refusal. What proof did the captain give you? Eleanor asked. A written confession. I locked it in the hidden compartment beneath the family chest. The brass key? Hale nodded. The key inside the rattle opens the compartment. The eldest boy placed the silver rattle on the table. Eleanor opened its end and removed the brass key. A tiny strip of blood-stained cloth came with it. Nathaniel recognized the pattern. It matched the captain's uniform. He returned this at the gorge, Eleanor said. He must have placed the cloth inside after Silas shot him. If he is alive, Hale replied, he can identify every person involved. The old chapel keeper shifted uneasily. I saw someone moving beneath the eastern bank after the bridge fell. Eleanor stood. Then we find him before Silas does. They returned to the gorge with the young clerk and 2 men from Briar House. Nathaniel followed Eleanor's instructions without protest. Below the broken bridge, they found blood on the rocks and drag marks leading toward an abandoned toll shelter. The captain lay inside. The bullet had passed through his shoulder. He had bound the wound with his own sash, but his skin was cold and grey. When Nathaniel entered, the captain tried to rise. Do not, Eleanor said. He betrayed you, Nathaniel warned, and he may still help save a child. She cleaned the wound while the clerk recorded the captain's first words. Silas had prepared everything months earlier. The 4 women, claiming to be the boys' mothers, were paid servants. Arabella had supplied her family's blue wax, so forged orders could be distinguished from ordinary Blackridge instructions. The parliamentary seal belonged to a junior official Silas had bribed. Most importantly, the captain knew where the missing boy had been taken. The old hunting lodge above the western quarry. He gasped. Silas will wait until midnight, then he will kill the child and say Eleanor refused the exchange. Which boy did he take? Nathaniel asked. The captain looked toward Eleanor. Samuel. Nathaniel stopped breathing. Eleanor's face remained still, but her hands began to shake. For 6 years, she had concealed her son among the others, so no enemy could isolate him. Silas had finally learned the truth. Nathaniel reached toward her. She pulled away. Do not comfort me. Help me. What do you need? Return to the chapel with Hale. Open the hidden compartment and bring the confession to the county courthouse. You expect me to leave while my son is held. I expect you to do the one thing you have refused to do since this began. Trust my judgment. Nathaniel looked at the captain. How will you rescue Samuel? Silas wants the register. I will bring him a book. The original? No. A faint hardness entered Eleanor's voice. I will give him exactly what a man who never reads beyond the first page deserves. Nathaniel rode toward the chapel with Reverend Hale and the keeper. Eleanor transferred the captain to Briar House under the clerk's care, documenting every hand that touched his confession. Then she prepared a duplicate register. The cover was genuine, taken from an abandoned parish ledger. The first pages copied the Blackridge family line exactly. Near the middle, Eleanor inserted blank sheets. Silas would not examine it at the lodge. He only needed to see the crest and old handwriting before exchanging Samuel. At 11 o'clock, Eleanor left alone. The 4 boys watched from the schoolroom window. Nathaniel reached Blackridge Chapel 20 minutes later. He opened the stone chest and fitted the brass key into a hidden lock beneath its base. The compartment was empty. Someone had arrived before him. A single piece of blue silk lay where the captain's confession should have been. Behind Nathaniel, the chapel door closed. Arabella stepped from the shadows, holding the missing document over a burning candle. You should have finished our wedding, she said. Then she lowered the captain's confession toward the flame. Arabella held the confession above the candle. Nathaniel moved toward her. She drew a small pistol from beneath her cloak. Another step and it burns. Reverend Hale stood near the chapel door with the keeper. Neither man carried a weapon. Nathaniel stopped. Why? He asked. Arabella smiled without warmth. Because your title is worth more than your affection, and Silas promised me both. You intended to marry me while he controlled the estates. I intended to give you the heir you wanted. Silas intended to remove every competing branch of your family. We would all have benefited. 5 children would be dead. 5 children you did not know existed this morning. The cruelty of the answer stripped away Nathaniel's final excuse. He had treated the boys as questions of inheritance. Eleanor had treated them as lives. Arabella lowered the confession into the flame. The corner blackened. Nathaniel lunged. She fired. The bullet struck the stone beside his head. Hale pulled Arabella's arm aside while Nathaniel seized the burning paper, but the dry sheet curled instantly. He crushed the flame beneath his hand. Only the final lines survived. The captain's name and Silas's written orders were gone. Arabella tore free and escaped through the vestry passage. Nathaniel could have followed her. Instead, he looked at the ruined confession in his burned palm. Once again, delay had cost Eleanor the truth. At 11:45, Eleanor reached the hunting lodge above the western quarry. Samuel stood behind an upper window. His hands were tied, but he was alive. Silas waited outside beneath a lantern. You came alone, as promised. The register. Eleanor placed the false book on a stone wall. Release the boy first. Silas laughed. You have never been in a position to give orders. I survived your carriage. I found every child you tried to erase. I walked into Nathaniel's wedding and stopped your final claim. You have mistaken my lack of a title for a lack of power. Silas's smile vanished. He opened the register. The first pages showed generations of Blackridge marriages and births. Eleanor had copied every line exactly, knowing he would examine only enough to satisfy himself. Silas signaled toward the lodge. A guard brought Samuel outside. The boy's eyes met Eleanor's. She tapped 2 fingers against the book's spine. The lost book. Samuel dropped to the ground. Eleanor threw the heavy register into the lantern. Darkness swallowed the yard. Samuel rolled beneath the stone wall, while Eleanor struck the guard with the metal clasp of the book. Silas fired blindly. The shot passed over her shoulder. Run to the quarry path, she shouted. Samuel ran. Silas caught Eleanor by the hair and dragged her backward. You gave me a false book. You gave Nathaniel a false wife. He struck her across the face. Eleanor fell, then swept the burning pages toward his boots. Silas stumbled away from the flames. She seized the guard's dropped knife and cut Samuel's remaining rope as the boy circled back rather than abandoning her. Go, she ordered. I am not leaving you. A horse thundered through the gate. Nathaniel entered the yard, followed by the chapel keeper and 2 royal officers. Silas aimed at Samuel. Eleanor stepped between them. Nathaniel fired first. The pistol flew from Silas's hand, but the bullet only grazed his wrist. Silas escaped through the rear stable and disappeared into the quarry tunnels. Nathaniel reached Eleanor. Are you hurt? She pulled Samuel against her. That question comes 6 years too late. Samuel buried his face in her coat. Nathaniel stared at the boy he now knew was his son. The resemblance was undeniable, not merely in his grey eyes, but in the way he placed himself beside Eleanor, as though protecting her were instinct. Nathaniel knelt. Samuel, the child looked at him. You signed us away. Nathaniel had no defense. Yes. Samuel turned his face back toward his mother. They returned to Briar House shortly before 1 in the morning. The front door stood open. Inside, the schoolroom had been destroyed. Tables lay overturned, the register was gone, and the 4 boys huddled with the parish widows behind a locked pantry door. The captain had disappeared. On the wall, someone had written a message in blue wax. The Duchess stole 5 children and murdered the only witness. Royal officers surrounded the house. Arabella stood beside the magistrate, her wedding gown replaced by a dark travelling dress. She returned with 1 child. Arabella announced, "But where is the captain who accused Lord Silas? Where is the original register she claimed would prove the boys' identities?" The magistrate looked at Eleanor. "You were the last person documented in possession of both." "The captain was alive when I left," Eleanor said, "and now there is blood in his bed and no body." Silas's plan had moved faster than them. He had destroyed or removed every apparent proof while Eleanor rescued Samuel. The magistrate raised a sealed order. "Eleanor Ashcombe, you are charged with abducting 5 minors. fabricating claims against the Blackridge succession and murdering a witness. Nathaniel stepped forward. She will not be taken. You signed the original complaint naming her a traitor. I was wrong. The officers hesitated. Nathaniel faced the magistrate, the parish women, and every servant gathered outside. Record this exactly. I expelled my lawful wife 6 years ago without examining evidence she placed in my hands. Today, I ordered her arrest without a warrant. I transferred 5 children to the man she warned me intended to kill them. The attack at the gorge occurred because my signature gave Lord Silas command over my guards. The magistrate's expression changed. Such an admission could cost Nathaniel his royal office and place his management of the estates under parliamentary review. Arabella stared at him. You would destroy your own name for her. No, I destroyed it when I chose pride over truth. I am merely ceasing to make her pay for it. Eleanor heard the words, but they did not restore what he had broken. The magistrate lowered the arrest order slightly. You admit misconduct, Your Grace. That does not prove her innocence. No, Eleanor said, it does not. She surrendered without resistance. The 4 boys rushed toward her, but she asked the parish widows to keep them back. As the officers escorted her to the carriage, Arabella approached. You should have remained dead. Eleanor looked at the blue wax on the wall. The words were written in large, hurried strokes. Beneath the final letter, the wax had dripped across an older chalk mark, a child's height line, labelled with a date. Eleanor stopped. Arabella had claimed she had never visited Briar House. Yet she knew the captain's bed was in the eastern room before anyone led her inside. She also knew the original register had been kept beneath the schoolroom floor, though only Eleanor, Hale, and the chapel keeper knew it had been moved there. Silas could have told her. But if Eleanor announced that now, Arabella would simply deny it. She needed to make Arabella reveal knowledge no innocent woman could possess. Eleanor turned to the magistrate. I will attend the county hearing at noon. Bring the 5 boys, the damaged family register, Lady Arabella, and Lord Silas, if he can be found. The register is missing. No, Eleanor said, slowly. Only the book is missing. She looked again at the empty space where the original had been stored. The 4 removed pages had never been the proof. Their absence was. Eleanor now knew how to force both conspirators to explain something only the people who cut those pages could know. At noon, the county courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Eleanor entered between 2 officers, but she did not lower her head. The 5 boys sat together behind Reverend Hale and the parish widows. Nathaniel stood apart from them, stripped of his ceremonial sword while Parliament reviewed his conduct. Arabella occupied the front bench in a black mourning dress, presenting herself as the abandoned bride whose wedding had been destroyed by a criminal. Silas was nowhere in sight. The magistrate opened the hearing. Eleanor Ashcombe, you claim these 5 children belong to the Blackridge line. The original register has disappeared. 4 essential pages were removed, and the only man who confessed to assisting Lord Silas is now missing. Arabella rose. Because there was never a confession. She addressed the crowded room with practiced sorrow. Eleanor kidnapped 4 children, placed her own son among them, and trained them to impersonate members of the Duke's family. When the captain discovered her fraud, she murdered him. The magistrate looked at Eleanor. Your response? She is correct about one thing, Eleanor said. I placed my son among 4 other boys. The courtroom erupted. Arabella smiled. Nathaniel did not move. Eleanor continued. I did it because someone had already killed their fathers. If the conspirators could not identify Nathaniel's son, they could not murder him without risking the survival of another lawful heir. You admit deception, Arabella said. I admit protecting children from people their duke trusted. The words turned every face toward Nathaniel. He accepted the shame without protest. Eleanor placed 5 copied family charts on the table. Each showed one boy's connection to the Blackridge bloodline through a different deceased relative. These relationships can be verified through parish books that never entered my possession. The magistrate examined them. Where are those books? On their way from 4 counties under separate guards. I sent the requests before entering the cathedral yesterday. Arabella's smile weakened. Eleanor had not depended upon one register. Her father had taught her that no important truth should survive in only one place. Convenient, Arabella said, but none has arrived. Then let us discuss the missing pages. Eleanor held up 4 blank sheets, numbered 113 through 116. Silas had cut 4 folios from the Blackridge register, but in his haste he had removed 8 numbered pages, 4 on the front, 4 on the reverse. The conspirators believed these sheets contained 5 consecutive birth entries, Eleanor explained. They did not. Arabella's eyes narrowed. One of the pages contained an account of a marriage, Eleanor continued. Another recorded the burial of a Blackridge infant. Only 3 contained entries concerning the boys. That is false, Arabella said sharply. All 5 names were written across pages 114 and 115. The courtroom fell silent. Arabella realized her mistake. Eleanor turned toward her. How could you know which pages contained the names? I heard you describe them at the chapel. No, I said only that 4 pages had been cut from the book. Arabella recovered quickly. Silas told me. Then Silas possessed the missing pages. Perhaps Eleanor told him, Arabella replied. Eleanor nodded as though conceding the point. Then tell us what was written beside Samuel's name. I have never seen it. You just claim to know the page. I was repeating what Silas said. What did Silas say? Arabella hesitated. Eleanor placed one of the blank sheets before her. Did the entry identify Samuel as my son alone? Arabella remained silent. Did it name Nathaniel? Silence again. Or did it state that Samuel was born at St. Jude's parish? Arabella's composure broke. He was not born at St. Jude's. He was born in the East Chamber at Blackridge Hall. A gasp swept through the courtroom. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Only the physician, the captain, Silas, and Eleanor had known where the child was delivered. Nathaniel had been told that the birth occurred later at a country house after Eleanor left the estate. Eleanor leaned forward. And how do you know that? Arabella's mouth opened, but no answer came. The magistrate struck the table. Lady Arabella, sit down. Eleanor had forced the first verifiable lie. But Silas remained free, and knowledge alone was not enough to convict him of attempted murder. The courthouse doors opened. Lord Silas entered with the missing captain beside him. The captain's shoulder was bandaged. 2 armed men supported him, and his face showed the grey exhaustion of someone kept awake through pain. Silas carried the original Blackridge register. Forgive my late arrival, he said. I have brought the evidence the Duchess concealed. Arabella stared at him with visible relief. Silas placed the register before the magistrate. The captain wishes to correct the false statement Eleanor forced him to make. The captain looked at Eleanor. Fear filled his eyes. Silas unfolded a signed declaration. It claimed Eleanor paid the captain to forge her husband's letters, damage her carriage, attack the boys, and blame Silas. According to the declaration, every crime had been staged to restore her position as Duchess. Did you sign this? The magistrate asked. The captain swallowed. Yes. Was it given freely? A pause. Yes. Eleanor watched his right hand. His fingers repeatedly touched the edge of his bandage. 3 touches. A pause. 2 more. The signal Reverend Hale taught the boys. He was warning her. Silas's men had forced the declaration, but the captain could not say so while they remained inside the courtroom. Eleanor looked toward the parish widows. One quietly led the 5 boys through a rear door. The young clerk moved to summon the royal officers stationed outside. Witnesses first. Evidence second. Confrontation last. Silas opened the family register to the damage center. Observe the cut pages, he said. Eleanor removed them because no legitimate entry names these children. Then why bring us the book? Eleanor asked. To expose you. No, you brought it because you replaced the missing pages. Silas's hand froze. The pages now stitched into the spine appeared old, but the thread was clean and pale. New entries named 4 women as the boys' surviving mothers and described Eleanor as the woman who abducted them. Silas had manufactured the evidence he needed after stealing the register from Briar House. Eleanor examined the replacement pages. The handwriting is false, she said. Silas smiled. You expect this court to accept your opinion? I expect Reverend Hale to recognize his own hand. Hale approached the table. 6 years ago, an injury shortened the final stroke of every name I wrote, he explained. These entries carry my old stroke, yet they are dated years after the injury. The magistrate examined the pages. Silas's confidence faltered. Eleanor placed the forged custody order beside the register. The same person altered this book and prepared the order used to seize the boys. Arabella rose sharply. That proves nothing. Eleanor turned toward her. I did not say the documents came from your household. Arabella stopped. No one else in the courtroom had mentioned her household. The magistrate looked from Arabella to the altered register. How did you know that was the accusation? Arabella searched for an answer. None came. Silas stepped back from the table. Arabella rose. That proves only that my household purchased ink. No, Eleanor said, but it proves the documents were created by someone with access to your household. Nathaniel finally approached the evidence table. I can prove more. The magistrate looked at him. Nathaniel placed his own estate orders beside the forged parliamentary document. These are my genuine signatures. For 6 years I allowed Silas to prepare documents and show me only the final page. The false order transferring custody of the boys carries my signature because I signed a blank instruction sheet at his request 3 weeks ago. Silas smiled. So the Duke admits negligence. That does not make me a murderer. No, Nathaniel said. My negligence belongs to me, and I will answer for it separately. The Duke turned toward Eleanor, but she gave him no sign of forgiveness. She gave no sign of forgiveness. The captain suddenly collapsed. As the officers rushed toward him, one of Silas's armed men reached beneath his coat. The eldest boy's voice rang from the gallery. He has a pistol. The officers seized the man before he could draw it. A second weapon was found on Silas's other guard. The magistrate ordered both arrested. Without the gunman beside him, the captain began to sob. Silas ordered the bridge destroyed, he said. He ordered the Duchess's carriage wheel cut 6 years ago, and Lady Arabella gave me the blue silk for the crossbow bolt. Silas moved toward the door. Royal officers blocked him. Eleanor did not look triumphant. She placed the silent silver rattle on the evidence table. One question remains, she said. How do we authenticate the 5 boys when the original pages recording them were removed? Reverend Hale looked at the rattle. The answer was never written only in the register. He fitted the brass key into a second opening, hidden beneath the Blackridge crest. The silver base turned. Inside was a tightly rolled strip of vellum bearing 5 seals. The magistrate reached for it. Hale covered the vellum with his hand. Before this is opened, every person in this room must understand what it proves. For the first time, fear appeared openly on Silas's face. Reverend Hale unrolled the vellum across the evidence table. 5 small seals appeared along its lower edge. These are not replacements for the missing pages, he said. They are confirmations created when Eleanor discovered that someone was altering parish records. Each seal belonged to a different parish. Beside it appeared a child's birth name, the names of his parents, and the signature of the clergyman who copied the entry from the original book. 4 extracts identified the orphaned sons of deceased Blackridge relatives. The 5th named Samuel Nathaniel Ashcombe. Father, Nathaniel Ashcombe, Duke of Blackridge. Mother, Eleanor Ashcombe, Duchess of Blackridge. Place of birth, the east chamber of Blackridge Hall. Nathaniel stared at the words. His son had not died. Samuel had lived inside his own house, while Silas's physician told him the child was stillborn. Eleanor had tried to place the physician's report in his hands, and he had burned it without reading a single line. The magistrate examined the seals. How can these be authenticated? The courtroom doors opened again. 4 parish clergymen entered with their original books. They had travelled separately, carrying records that matched every extract hidden inside the rattle. One after another, they confirmed the seals. The 5th authentication came from Reverend Hale himself. Samuel looked across the courtroom at Nathaniel. Does the paper mean you believe us now? Nathaniel's face tightened. No, he said quietly. Your mother's courage should have been enough. Eleanor heard the answer, but she did not turn toward him. Belief offered after proof was not the same as trust given when it could still save someone. The silver rattle never left my custody until I gave it to Eleanor 3 nights ago, he said. The vellum was sealed inside 6 years earlier, after the captain warned me that Lord Silas intended to destroy the register. Silas's face had gone white. You cannot prove I ordered any death, Silas said. The wounded captain lifted his head. I can prove it, he answered. He described the forged letters, the damaged carriage wheel, the false report of Eleanor's death, the crossbow attack, and the explosives beneath the gorge bridge. The young clerk confirmed that the cathedral window had been broken from inside. 2 chapel witnesses confirmed that Arabella had sent the blue wax message and that the cathedral window had been broken from inside. The stationer's ledger connected Arabella's household to the forged documents. Finally, Eleanor placed Nathaniel's signed custody order beside the evidence. "This is the document that gave Silas control of the boys," she said. Silas smiled bitterly. Silas pointed at Nathaniel. "The Duke signed it. If I am guilty, so is he." Every face in the courtroom turned toward the Duke. Nathaniel stepped forward. "Not of your murders, but I am guilty of making them possible." Silas's smile faded. Nathaniel addressed the magistrate and the crowded gallery. "I chose not to examine the evidence my wife brought me. I allowed my cousin to control my correspondence because it was easier than questioning him. I expelled Eleanor while she was recovering from childbirth. Yesterday, when she returned with 5 threatened children, I accused her again because admitting my first failure would have wounded my pride." Eleanor remained still. Nathaniel continued. "My signature gave Silas command over my guards. My public accusation made every lie against Eleanor appear believable. These were not innocent mistakes. They were choices." The magistrate ordered Silas and Arabella taken into custody. Silas resisted. 2 officers forced his arms behind his back. Arabella struggled against the officers and called to Nathaniel. "You cannot permit them to treat your intended wife like a criminal." Nathaniel faced the woman he had nearly married. "You were never my wife." The unfinished wedding had saved him from a second disastrous marriage, but it did not erase what he had done to his first. Arabella was charged with conspiracy, forgery, bribery, attempted destruction of evidence, and participation in the attacks against the boys. Silas faced additional charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, and the deaths of the 4 Blackridge fathers, whose accidents were now reopened for investigation. The captain was arrested for his role in the forged letters and carriage attack. His testimony and attempt to help the boys were considered later, but they did not free him from punishment. The 4 women who falsely claimed motherhood confessed after learning Silas could no longer protect them. By sunset, Eleanor's name had been cleared. The charges against her were dismissed in the same courtroom where Arabella expected to see her condemned. But vindication was not the same as restoration. Eleanor turned to the magistrate. "I want the boys' identities protected until each guardianship is settled. I want Briar House placed beyond Blackridge control permanently. And I want every false accusation against me corrected in Parliament, not merely erased from a county record." Nathaniel answered before the magistrate could. "It will be done." Eleanor looked at him. "You will not grant these things as favours." "No." He removed the Blackridge signet ring from his hand. "I will execute a binding settlement transferring funds and independent trusteeship to Briar House. The 4 orphaned boys will remain under guardians chosen with your consent. Samuel will remain with you." His voice faltered on the last words. Eleanor had expected him to demand his son. Instead, he surrendered control of the decision he most desperately wanted to make. "I will also resign my royal office," Nathaniel said. "Until Parliament completes its inquiry, the Northern Estates will be administered by independent trustees." The consequence was immediate. He retained his title, but not the unquestioned authority he had valued above his wife. 3 weeks later, Nathaniel stood before Parliament. He did not blame Silas for deceiving him. He named every choice as his own. He publicly withdrew the adultery accusation against Eleanor, acknowledged Samuel as his lawful son, and confirmed the identities of the 4 other boys. Copies of the correction were sent to every parish where Silas's false complaints had been filed. Eleanor received separate maintenance, control of her inherited trust, and permanent authority over the schools she had created. She did not return to Blackridge Hall. Nathaniel came to Briar House once, without guards or a ducal carriage. The 5 boys were playing in the yard. Samuel saw him at the gate but did not run forward. Nathaniel waited. Eleanor approached. "I have brought the completed settlement," he said. He handed her the document without asking to enter. She read the final clause. Nathaniel had transferred the income from 2 private, unentailed estates to the protection and education of the 5 boys. He could not reclaim the property, even if Eleanor refused ever to speak to him again. "This does not repair what I did," he said. "It only stops me from benefiting from it." Eleanor folded the document. "You once asked which boy was yours as though the answer would determine which child deserved protection. Nathaniel lowered his head. I know. The answer was Samuel. But for 6 years, all 5 were mine whenever they were hungry, frightened, or in danger, and I treated them as claims against my name. Yes, Nathaniel did not ask for forgiveness. He placed her wedding ring, the ring removed from her injured hand after the carriage attack, on the stone wall between them. Silas had kept it as proof of her supposed death. It had been recovered from his locked desk. I thought you might want this returned. Eleanor picked up the ring. She did not put it on. Samuel may write to you, she said, if he chooses. Nathaniel's eyes lifted. And you? I will judge what you become when no one is promising you a reward. It was not forgiveness, but it was not a final door closing. Nathaniel bowed and stepped away from the gate. Months passed. He rebuilt the bridge at Blackridge Gorge using his private funds, but he did not place his name upon it. Instead, a small plaque honored the 5 children who survived because they refused to abandon one another. He visited Briar House only when invited. He listened when the boys spoke. He never asked Samuel to call him father. Slowly, Samuel began walking beside him during those visits. Eleanor watched from a distance. She saw remorse becoming discipline, not merely sorrow, yet she kept her separate home, her authority, and the life she had built without him. One spring morning, Briar House opened a new school wing. 5 boys waited before its doors, each carrying a book. Nathaniel stood outside the gate. At the cathedral, Eleanor and the children had walked toward him, while he decided whether they were worthy of belief. Now he stood aside. Eleanor turned the brass key, opened the doors, and let the boys enter before her. Samuel paused and looked back at Nathaniel. You may come in, he said. Nathaniel crossed the yard slowly. Eleanor did not offer him her hand. She simply held the door open long enough for him to choose whether he could enter a future he no longer controlled. This time, he stepped through, without asking anyone else to surrender their place.